Let's look at some simple elements that will allow you to add space on your page using line breaks and horizontal rules, also just known as lines. I have some pre-written HTML here that is an article about New York's best coffee shops. I've written a bunch of text, including headers and paragraphs, and addresses for each location. However, you'll notice that the addresses are appearing all on one line. And that's not visually ideal. It's not really how addresses are structured in real life. So you might say in order to get these addresses to appear on two separate lines, we could just make each of them their own paragraph. I'll go ahead and add p tags to do just that. But this looks a little ridiculous, right? Like, this is an absurd amount of space between addresses and doesn't semantically make sense because an address is not really two different paragraph elements. It's just the same element but broken up onto different lines. This is when you can add a line break element. A line break element is as simple as a BR tag after the line where you want the line break to appear. For example, since we want there to be a break after 824 Broadway, I insert the BR tag here right after 824 Broadway, and New York, New York will appear on a separate line right underneath, instead of being so far away from the initial line in a paragraph tag. I'm going to go out and fill these addresses with line breaks, and you'll often use line breaks in addresses, as you would expect, and in poetry, for example, where you don't need to have an entire chunk of space between each line. In fact, you want the poem to be its own paragraph with just a simple line break in between each line. Now, one quick note about line breaks. It's really easy to think, oh, if I want a bunch of white space on my page, I can just add a lot of line breaks, right? Like, let's say we want to have a lot of space in between this introductory paragraph and the Manhattan heading. Why not just go like this and insert a bunch of line breaks? Because it does add space, but this is a terrible use of HTML. Remember that HTML should be about your content, not about its appearance. When we say we want to add a lot of space in between elements, this is just talking about visual effects that we could instead accomplish via CSS. However, using a line break in an address is appropriate because it's relevant to the content itself. Let's look at a different way to break up different groups of content, not just a line break, but an actual line. For example, if we wanted to separate by borough this article, so let's have Manhattan in its own group up here, and then a line with Brooklyn underneath, so separating our content by theme or by borough, we could add a horizontal rule, an HR tag, as you might expect. Horizontal rules are easy to add, and they're a nice way to group together structural elements of your page.